Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. All right. So with that, welcome everybody to the Mikestand. Today is, of course, Wednesday, May the 28th, 2025. So that means we're at Hub Day. Hopefully, you guys are having a good week thus far. Of course, we're going to give people a chance to come in before we get started. Of course, if you haven't already, you guys can help out by liking and sharing the stream. See if we can get some more friendly people to engage. It'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions. I'll try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. With that being said, as I said, we're just waiting on people to show up here. And that we do. So, anyways, well, I guess I'll just go ahead and get right started too. So tonight we're gonna take a little bit of a break on the more serious stuff. We're gonna go over some profile articles from MeTV Tunes, some interesting stuff. A little tidbit type articles here. Um, Among those, of course, including, um, do you share a birthday with a Hanna-Barbera character? Look at that article. For George O'Hanlon was George Jetson. He was rejected by Hanna-Barbera. So we'll see what that's all about. Cartoon feud. Chuck Jones versus Bob Clampett. Hanna-Barbera weren't allowed to receive their Tom and Jerry Oscars. I wonder why that was. And then the A-list cast of Captain Planet. So basically, got like about 5 articles there that should go as usual. They usually go pretty quickly. So plus, of course, we have the wrestling wrap up. We'll get caught up on last night's NXT as well as look ahead to tonight's Dynamite. And again, as always, a friendly reminder. And then, of course, we'll wrap things up, of course, with this day in each history. As always, if you guys haven't already, you guys can help out by liking and sharing the stream. See if we can get some more friendly people in here to engage. That'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions. And I will try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. With that being said, why don't we go ahead get started with our material tonight here. So the first article here we're going to go over here. Do you share a birthday with a Hanna-Barbera character? Which classic character are you sharing a cake with? Article published back on May 19th, which was, wow, well over a week ago. Today's what, the 28th? So last Monday by MeTV Tin staff. So let's see what all happens here. If you're reading this and it's your birthday, happy birthday from all of us here at MeTV Tunes. Have you ever wondered if you share a birthday with a cartoon character? I don't think I have, but that would be interesting. I do know I share a birthday with a professional wrestler. Rhino, I've talked about that several times. But with a cartoon character, that might be interesting. Well, wonder no more. Many Hanna-Barbera characters celebrate their birthdays on their shows, and Hanna-Barbera also released a yearly calendar to employees and fans, which included character birthdays. Let's take a look at all of the Hanna-Barbera birthdays and see if you have a Hanna-Barbera birthday buddy. January 14th, Magilla Gorilla. Oh, Mr. Peebles, Mr. Peebles, one banana birthday cake, please. So January 14th, that's like a day before Martin Luther King Day. So, and considering, of course, Magilla Gorilla first came about was first premiered back in 1965, around the same time that, of course, Martin Luther King would have been having his ministry and all that. That seems like a very interesting time. Let's see. Who else do we see here? January 17th, Huckleberry Hound. Ah, shucks. If January 17th is your birthday, give yourself buddies with Huck. Oh, my darling, oh, my darling, oh, my darling Clementine. Let's see. Groundhog Day. Fred Flintstone. Of course, Groundhog Day is like February 2nd. So, in the episode The Birthday Party, Fred Flintstone's birthday is on Groundhog Day. So he always misses it. If your birthday has ever fallen on Groundhog Day, you can count yourself as one of Fred Flintstone's birthday buddies. February 22nd, Pebbles Flintstone. Pebbles' birthday has a huge celebration in the cartoon world. Ideal Toys even took out ads in newspapers that looked like birth announcements to help promote the episode where Pebbles was born. February 22nd, I believe that was the same date too. I think it was in 1964. 1964 when we were first introduced to Pebbles. And of course, February 22nd is also the birthday of George Washington too. So Pebbles Flintstone shares a birthday with George Washington, former the first president of the United States. Talk about being in good company, huh? Of course, Pebbles Flintstone, of course, has been voiced over the years by, of course, Gene Vanderpill, as who also did, of course, Wilma Flintstone, among many other Hanna-Barbera cartoons. Sally Struthers had some time as Pebbles Flintstone. So, anyways, moving on. March 12th, Joe Barbera. So, one of the two founders of Hanna-Barbera Productions, Joe Barbera. While he may not be a cartoon character, Joe Barbera is one half of the dynamic Hanna-Barbera duo that met up at MGM, working on Tom and Jerry cartoons and, throughout the 40s and early in 50s, and then moving on to, of course, moving on to start his own, him and William Hanna moving on to their, to start up their own company. Let's see. And if you happen to share a birthday with him, you should feel very proud. Joe Barbera's birthday is also listed as the anniversary on the moon landing on the Jetsons. March 21st, Scooby-Doo. Scooby-Dooby-Doo, where are you? A day away from the official first day of spring. So Scooby was born right before the official start of spring one year. Scooby-Doo's birthday is hotly debated. Is a hotly debated topic. Some consider September 13th, the anniversary of the premiere of Scooby-Doo, Where Are You?, to be his birthday, while others point out that in the episode Happy Birthday Scooby-Doo, his birthday just appears as the first Saturday of an unspecified month. We welcome the debate, but the Hanna-Barbera calendar officially lists Scooby's birthday as March 21st. So at least according to the official Hanna-Barbera calendar, which is probably the most authentic source, Scooby was born on March 21st, which happens, of course, to be the day before the official start of spring. Hey, if it shows up, thanks for popping in. If you haven't already, if you can help out by liking and sharing the stream, see if we can get some more friendly people to engage, that'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions. I'll try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. So, April 19th, Elroy Jetson, of course, who was voiced for a long time by the late great Mel Blanc. If you share a birthday with Elroy, keep in mind that he hasn't been born yet. His birthday is April 19th, 2055. You can celebrate with him in about 30 years. Or just jump in a time machine and go about 30 years in the future. But then if he's born in 2055, he's about 10 when the show premiered. So that meant the show took place probably in 2065. Well, actually, no, maybe 2062, since the show premiered in 1962. So 2062, that would actually made him about 7 then. April 28th, Scrappy Doo. 28th is Puppy Powerful Day. Puppy Power! Of course, voiced by the late, great Lenny Weinrib, among others. Of course, Don Messick. Also, May 29th. Oh, coming up here. And tomorrow. So, Top Cat's birthday will be tomorrow. And if we take it by, when he premiered back in 1961, that would probably make him 64 years old tomorrow. So, consider yourself the top cat of your friends because you share a birthday with the one and only top cat, the unbelievable top cat. Close friends call him TC, provided it's with dignity. Top cat, leader of the gang. Anyways. July 14th, Bill Hanna, the other half of that dynamic duo that gave us a bunch of great characters, starting with, of course, MGM with Tom and Jerry, along with, of course, Yogi Bear, the Huckleberry Hound, Snagglepuss, Top Cat, many of the characters. Fun fact, Bill Hanna's birthday is also Rough and Ready's birthday. So if your birthday is July 14th, you share it with 3 cartoon icons. Bill Hanna, Rough and Ready. For those of you who may not remember, Rough and Ready was the first television cartoon series that was produced by Hanna-Barbera in 1957. It even predates the Huckleberry Hound show by a year. So it didn't pick up quite as much as of course, Huckleberry Hound did. But August 10th, Touche Turtle. Touche away! More like Touche Birthday. The sword swing. September 9th, Yogi Bear. I'm smarter than the average bear. Fun fact, the Hanna-Barbera calendar also marked the dates when Yogi went into and woke up from hibernation. Yeah, so September 9th. September 22nd, Wally Gator. Oh, fuddle-dee-doo. Your birthday is Wally Gator's too. The wandering gator who doesn't like to stay in the zoo. September 30th, Snagglepuss. Evans the Murgatroyd. What a swell birthday, buddy, you have in Snagglepuss. October 6th, Judy Jetson. So Judy's at least, Judy and I celebrate right around the same time. She's day before me. Of course, she's, if she was, let's say, well, actually, she hasn't been born yet either. So theoretically, for all we know, she's born in 2045, or maybe even 2047, I would say. As far as we know, Judy Jetson is the only Hanna-Barbera character with an October birthday. So October 6th, So, anyways, well, she and I at least share a birthday in the same month, at least. So that'd be nice to hang out with Judy. But maybe go on a little birthday date or whatever with her, huh? November 17th, Lippy the Lion. Here comes Lippy the birthday lion. November 17th. Hey, Edwin. Thanks for popping in. Peeps. Yeah, so we're just going over article talking about Hanna-Barbera characters' birthdays. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. And of course, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions. I'll try to answer the question to the best of my ability. November 20th, Bam 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 Bam. Our last birthday of the year goes to little Bam Bam. Bam 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 Bam. So watch The House of Hanna-Barbera on MeTV Tunes weekdays at 11 a.m. Eastern, 10 Central, 8 Pacific, and Sundays at 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Pacific, and 10 a.m. or 12 Central and 10 a.m. Pacific. Well, there we go with that one. So let's get ready to move on to the next article here. These articles tend to go pretty quick. That's why I'm doing multiple. Plus, I haven't checked this site in the last week, so. All right, so here's the next article then. Before George O'Hanlon was George Jetson, he was rejected by Hanna-Barbera. George O'Hanlon got a second shot to be in a Hanna-Barbera production. Article published May 19th, 2025 by MeTV. So I guess well, that's sometimes what happens. You don't get the call one time, but if you make enough of an impression, maybe they'll bring you back for something. Oh, there's George Jetson, George O'Hanlon, the man who provided the voice of George Jetson that we all grew up with. With the impact and lasting presence of the Jetsons has in mind of the fans, that the Jetsons has in mind of the fans, it can be easy to forget that the actual series' lifetime was relatively short. The original series lasted only 24 episodes before it was canceled. However, did you know that George O'Hanlon, the voice of Patriarch George, was actually originally slated to play another enigmatic cartoon character? Actually, I was not aware of that. But going back to that whole thing, yeah, originally the original Jetsons was only, I think, 24 episodes, but it became a big syndicated hit. Was part of Childhood Afternoons, I know, throughout the 80s. And then, of course, I think it was 1985 or 86, they decided to bring it back, not only the original series, but also, add to it. And, of course, that in that 80s series of the Jetsons, that kind of continuation of if you want to call it season 2, I guess, that's the season where we got Orbity, the little alien who turned color whenever his mood or feelings changed or what have you. According to an article in the Thousand Oaks Star, Thousand Oaks, which I'm guessing means from Thousand Oaks, California. O'Hanlon was originally geared to play the role of Fred Flintstone of the Flintstones. Unfortunately, the merge wouldn't come to pass, and Hanna-Barbera rejected O'Hanlon. Shockingly, it wasn't their decision, but rather the network's. And a little interesting side note, of course, O'Hanlon, as George, would work with Fred, who by this point was being voiced by Henry Corden. in the I believe it was the 1987 film, The Jetsons Meet the Flintstones. You guys remember that one? Of course, by that point, Alan Reed had passed away. 10 years prior, Henry Corden had taken over the role of Fred at that point. But anyways, the article stated, quote, in 1959, he, in brackets O'Hanlon, was the first choice of Joe Barbera to be the voice of Fred Flintstone in the Flintstones. He made a tape that Barbera liked, but network executives in New York did not. O'Hanlon was dropped and Alan Reed got the part, unquote. I wonder how it would have sounded as Fred, because obviously he did well as George, but Fred's voice, of course, is a little deeper, a little gruffer, So would have been interesting to hear O'Hanlon. Still, all hope was not lost, as Barbera was so impressed with O'Hanlon that he kept him in mind. The article continued, quote, a couple years later, Barbera came up with the idea for the Jetsons, a spin-off of the Flintstones. Actually, I wasn't even aware that was really a spin-off. I mean, they do have kind of, you have one that's set in the Stone Age and one that's set in the Space Age. I mean, yeah, maybe, but I've never thought of it as quote-unquote a spin-off per se. But again, he tapped O'Hanlon for the lead role, and this time he got it, unquote. Of course, though the show would end far too soon, it would return decades later in addition to a number of film adaptations and television specials. Of course, I mentioned the Jetsons Meet the Flintstones, the Jetsons Christmas Carol, Rock On Judy Jetson, among others. Nancy O'Hanlon, George's wife, offered this wise comment regarding the situation. Quote, but you know something, even though only 24 episodes were made, the Jetsons never were off the air for the next 22 years. As I mentioned before, many of us grew up probably watching the Jetsons, even after its original run was canceled, because even though it didn't I guess it didn't take too long for it to go into syndication, right? For like independent networks, independent television stations across the country to buy up the rights to broadcast it. So watch the Jetsons on MeTV Tunes every day at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 Pacific, 6 Central, and 4 p.m. Pacific. So let's see. Let's get ready to move on to the next article now, because that one went pretty quick. All right, so here we go with another one. Cartoon feuds: Chuck Jones versus Bob Clampett. Drama down at the Termite Terrace. Article published May 20th, which was last Tuesday, not yesterday, but a week ago yesterday, by MeTV Toon staff. So let's see what's going on here. Chuck Jones versus Bob Clampett. Let's see what's going on here. Two legendary figures, of course, at Warner Brothers. Of course, Chuck Jones also went on to work for MGM in the 60s. So if you're looking for beef, we've got it hot to go. Imagine having such a tumultuous rivalry with someone that the drama ends up both on your Wikipedia pages. Imagine how infuriating it is to be in a feud with someone for over 30 years, and then they take credit for your and your friend's work. But also imagine an ex-friend turning many of your friends against you and smearing your name in the press because you allegedly misremembered something. This is the story of how two of the most visionary directors at Looney Tunes couldn't stand each other. Wow! you misremember something and you just go into this very bitter feud. That sounds kind of interesting, to say the least. Let's see. Bob Clampett and Chuck Jones, quote unquote, grew up together as animators, starting as assistant animators in Tex Avery's unit. Tex Avery, when he was during his time in the 30s with Warner Brothers, of course, before having come in from Walter Lantz Productions and going back to Walter Lantz after he left, and eventually ending up in MGM as well. Under Avery, they learned and trained until they were ready to direct. The first few cartoons, like Porky and Gabby and Rover's Rival, and I just happened to watch Rover's Rival today, by the way. So Jones and Clampett co-directed as their own unit, but this was only after Jones had worked as an uncredited co-director with Clampett on another animator's 2 unfinished cartoons. Many animation historians pin this moment for Jones, who found himself confronting his friend to receive credit for his work, as to where the bad blood started. After Porky's Papa, Jones and Clampett did not direct together again. Jones and Clampett got along at least cordially until 1946. Both animators had been at Leon Schlesinger Productions for at least 15 years. And suddenly, Schlesinger announced his retirement and that he had sold the studio to Warner Brothers. Now there was a new sheriff in town, the no-fun, no-nonsense Eddie Seltzer. And he was placed in the studio by Warner Brothers to manage the animation productions. By all accounts, no one was happy about Seltzer taking the reins. But most animators continued their work as best they could. Clampett was already on thin ice because many of his cartoons were censored, and very nearly censored. A censored cartoon was like setting money on fire because it couldn't be shown in theaters, which meant no money for Warner Brothers or Schlesinger. Clampett wasn't even trying to abide by the censorship rules, but trying, in parentheses, and failing, to find loopholes around them. Seltzer fired him, but Clampett also wanted out because he saw a bright new horizon in television, a place where he could own his work and not be held accountable to Schlesinger or Seltzer. Yeah, 1948 was around the time when you did start seeing, cartoonists going more towards television. Some of the early cartoons included, of course, The Adventures of Pow Wow and Crusader Rabbit. Let's see now. Okay. And again, if you guys haven't already, you guys can help out by liking and sharing the stream. See if we can get some more friendly people in here to engage. That'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions, and I'll try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. While Clampett was starting over, Chuck Jones was stepping into his directorial prowess. He was creating characters like Wile E. Coyote and Marvin the Martian, collaborating with Michael Maltese for classic hits like Duck Amuck and What's Opera Doc, and most importantly, delivering hit after hit with no censored cartoons. Jones was, for Warner Brothers, a money-printing machine and an indispensable cartoonist. Chuck Jones' star was rising, and Clampett's was too, but not as meteorically as it had in his Looney Tune days. After his television shows wrapped, Clampett became an animation professor and went on speaking tours about animation history. He interviewed frequently and was happy to reminisce on his memories of Termite Terrace and the wonderful cartoons he created there. Clampett was then tapped to narrate and appear in a 1976 documentary, Bugs Bunny Superstar. If you watch the documentary, Clampett's enthusiasm and love for cartoons was undeniable, but he also takes credit for many of the cartoon characters that were either group effort creations or created by other animators entirely. The documentary was the straw that broke decades of tension and made Chuck Jones snap. I mean, you can't really blame him if he's taking credit for work he didn't do that other people did. That's kind of a poopy thing to do. Clampett had made many of the claims in the documentary on speaking tours, talk shows, and radio interviews. But repeating these claims in an official documentary made Jones decide that enough was enough. Jones wrote a 5-page letter outlining Clampett's claims and debunked them one by one, citing each claim's true creator. Jones had receipts for everything, but it was easy to have receipts when some of Clampett's claims were so outrageous, like taking credit for cartoons from after he had been fired by Warner Brothers. Yeah, I mean that would make that. I mean, if he's taking credit for characters that were created, like made Wile E. Coyote and like I think Foghorn Leghorn was one of those who was probably created after he left. Then yeah, that would be. Before sending the letter out to the press, Jones sent the letter to Tex Avery and asked for his thoughts. Avery went through the letter and co-signed Jones' statements, even adding, in quote, for 30 years, I have been sickened by, in small quote, Super Clampett's false claims to characters in cartoons that you, Fritz, in brackets, Frayling, and myself created. Your true exposure of these facts is very gratifying and comforting to me. Now I can rest in peace. Unquote. Jones and Avery forwarded the letter to Michael Barrier, an animation historian, whose interviews with Clampett contained many of these claims. Avery also suggested sending the letters to universities and organizations that featured Clampett as a speaker. According to Clampett's friends and supporters, Jones and Avery gave copies of the letter to anyone who would listen. But we will never know for sure who received copies of the letter outside of Michael Barrier. By the way, Chuck Jones and Tex Avery weren't the only ones who had issues with Clampett. In his memoir, That's Not All Folks, Mel Blanc also dunked on Clampett while describing his relationship with all the other directors as positive. Quote, the only one I had any trouble with was Clampett. He was an egotist who took credit for everything, yet in the studio he could be irritatingly indecisive. Unquote. So apparently Clampett wasn't as great as he wanted everybody to believe, apparently. Hey, Metal. Thanks for popping in. Well, there's some cartoon focused stories tonight, so hopefully you enjoy them. Go going to some of these more profile pieces, some of these more historical profile pieces tonight. Not quite as overall, not quite as serious as we usually do, but every now and then it's nice to take a little break. Serious stuff. Anyways, Clampett was obviously crushed by Jones' meltdown. Animation historian and Clampett's friend denied the counterclaims in the letter and said Clampett was a, quote, kind, generous man who was deeply hurt and saddened by Jones' accusations, unquote. Gray also, okay, they forgot to mention who. So Gray also called the letter, quote, a deliberate and vicious smear campaign by one of Bob's rivals in the cartoon business, unquote. While takedown letter may have occasionally felt mean-spirited, Chuck Jones stuck to his guns, even refusing to credit Clampett as co-director of the Bugs Bunny in his 1979 film, The Bugs Bunny Roadrunner Movie. Watch Bugs Bunny and Friends on MeTV Tunes weekdays at 9 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Central, 6 a.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. Pacific. Saturdays at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 Central, 5 Pacific, and Sundays at 12 noon, 11 a.m. Central, 9 a.m. Pacific. So we got I think we got at least a couple more here. That was a very interesting article, to say the least. Let's continue on to the next one here. All right, so here's the next article we're going to, of course, go over here. Hanna-Barbera weren't allowed to receive their Tom and Jerry Oscars. An award season game of cat and mouse article published on May 22nd, which was last Thursday, 6 days ago, by MeTV Toon staff. So let's see what this is all about now. Real interesting stories coming out of cartoon land, huh? As a cartoon series, Tom and Jerry won 7 Oscars, but their creators Bill Hanna and Joe Barbera were not allowed to receive their statues or attend the Academy Awards ceremony. While this was arguably unfair, the official Academy rules at the time said that only producers could receive the trophy for Best Animated Short Film. This meant that Fred Quimby received the award despite having very limited involvement in the actual cartoons. But that was probably a rule across. That's probably just a general rule across. I mean, yes, but it's not just unfair just for Hanna and Barbera, but it's probably unfair for everybody who was involved, who was actually involved in, unless you had, like, I know there probably were some producers who actually did have more input into their creation, but for those who didn't, yeah, that is very unfair. According to Joe Barbera's memoir, My Life in Toons, Hanna-Barbera tried to appease Quimby. Quote, we implored, we cajoled, we begged him to give us at least co-producer credit so that we would be eligible for an Oscar. Quote, no, unquote, he replied. His hands were tied. Quimby's reasons were hardly palpable to Barbera, who said, quote, well, I would be lying if I did not admit that for me, such injustices were bitter pills that went down very, very hard, unquote. While Quimby always credited and thanked Hanna and Barbera in his acceptance speeches, it was still unfair that the cartoon's creators did not get their moment of recognition. Here, they were two creators of an Academy Award winning series and receiving no Academy Awards for it. Meanwhile, their supervisor, who had never been involved in the production of these cartoons, kept all 7 Oscar statues on his desk. Anyways, I do need to step away from the computer. Hey, Apex. Thanks for popping in. I do need to go off camera here for a quick moment, so I'll be right back, but I'm going to go ahead and put some music on while I'm gone. But I will be right back. I'm back. Sorry about that. Anyways, friendly reminder, of course, if you guys can help out by liking and sharing the stream, see if we can get some more friendly people involved to engage. That'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions. I'll try to answer the questions the best of my ability. So, with that being said, let's kind of try to continue on here. Okay, all right. Instead of sulking, Bill Hanna had an idea. One afternoon, Bill Hanna recalled, when Quimby was out at meetings, Hanna-Barbera, quote, marshaled our little group of animators. A few minutes later, a half dozen of us assembled around Fred's desk, grinning in conspiratorial pride as a photograph was snapped with 7 little Oscars all in a row before us, unquote. Wow. While Fred Quimby may have had their Oscars, Hanna-Barbera had a partnership and eventually earned 8 Emmy Awards, a Golden Globe, and a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, of course, for their work, of Hanna-Barbera, as Hanna-Barbera Productions. Anyway, watch the Tom and Jerry Show on MeTV Tunes, weekdays at 5 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Central to Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern on Saturdays, 4 p.m. Eastern, 3 Central, 1 Pacific, and Sundays at 9 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Central, 6 Pacific. Alrighty then. So now we'll move on to the next article here. I think we might only have one more article to go over here. Yep. This is the last article we're doing tonight. And we did get through quite a bit of time. We're already at the 43-minute mark here. So, where are you going to? So, the A-list cast of Captain Planet, the quote in parentheses, star power is yours. And yes, Captain Planet, they did have, I know, Metal, I know you watched quite a bit of Captain Planet, so you probably knew this as well. There was a number of big name actors who lent their voices to the cast. So, article published on May 27th by MeTV Tunes Staff. Of course, May 27th, that would have been yesterday. Let's take a look at this. We have some pictures there. Let's see. Captain Planet and the Planeteers is a great show with an even greater message, but creators Ted Turner and Barbara Pyle wanted to make sure that message was heard by everyone. To increase the star power, Ted Turner used his connections in Hollywood to encourage A-list celebrities to join the show that raised awareness about environmental and social justice. The hope was that celebrities playing characters would interest people in giving the show a try, and it worked. If well, now maybe not everybody would have agreed that about the messaging or what have you, but the stars flocked to the show, many voicing one-off guest star roles, and few committing to be series regulars. Let's take a look at the stars who lent their voices to Captain Planet. Rita Moreno, who played Ella Salvatore. EGOT legend, Rita Moreno, guest starred in one episode of Captain Planet as Ella Salvatore, a philanthropist who wants to create an eco-railway to help reduce smog. She's kidnapped by Dr. Blight, but then saved by Captain Planet and the Planeteers in the episode The Disoriented Express. Dionne Warwick, Dr. Russell. Dionne Warwick, of course, known more for singing roles, but she's also had a few television roles, guest starring roles as well. For some reason, Jeff Goldblum was venomous scum, the only good villain from that show. Yep. Well, yeah, I know. Like Ed Asner was Hoggish Greedley. He'd of course go on to play Hudson in Gargoyles and all that. But anyways, so let's see. In the episode "See No Evil," spelled S-E-A, Dionne Warwick played Dr. Russell, a misguided dolphin facility owner who realizes that the dolphins she thinks she's saving are being controlled by Hoggish Greedley. Whoopi Goldberg, Gaia. And it's kind of funny. One of the funny things about this too is that if you take a look at Whoopi at that time, right, late 80s, early 90s, and how Gaia looked, it's almost like they literally drew Whoopi as Gaia, right? Metal, I don't know if you'd agree with me on that, but yeah, let's see. Before she was on The View, Whoopi Goldberg was the voice of Mother Nature, aka Gaia, for seasons 1 through 3. Of course, she had a few other famous roles as well. She, of course, was Guinan on Star Trek: The Next Generation. She was, of course, had the lead role in Sister Act as well, the movie Sister Act, and Jumpin' Jack Flash. So, but again, one of the things I noticed about that too is if you take a look at how Whoopi looked back at that point in time, look at Gaia. It's almost like they did actually. Now, granted, they made Gaia's skin slightly lighter toned than Whoopi's, but still, you could argue that they actually drew Whoopi Goldberg as Gaia in that show. So go figure. LeVar Burton, Kwame. LeVar Burton, of course, famous for, of course, being Geordi LaForge in Star Trek: The Next Generation, as well as throughout the whole original Gene Roddenberry Star Trek universe. He is also, of course, the host of the PBS program Reading Rainbow. So, before Star Trek and Reading Rainbow, actually, no, not quite. Well, maybe, actually, no. It was after Star Trek and Reading Rainbow, I believe. So, LeVar Burton voiced the Planeteer Kwame for 113 episodes. He also voiced the opening. The voice. He also is the voice of the opening narrator. Yeah, but as I said, I I think he was actually on Star Trek and Reading Rainbow before Captain Planet. So Vanna White as Laurie Saunders. Vanna White was also a guest star on Captain Planet as Laurie Saunders, a beauty queen whose makeup company is testing on animals. When Saunders discovers Dr. Blight is testing on animals, she fires her. Neil Patrick Harris is Todd Andrews. Of course, Neil Patrick Harris, most famously known for his role as Doogie Howser from around that same time. In the episode A Formula for Hate, quote unquote, Neil Patrick Harris guest stars as Todd Andrews, a high school basketball player who has HIV. This episode premiered in 1992 when the AIDS epidemic was not well understood and focused on the ostracization of those who tested positive for HIV. Elizabeth Taylor as Mrs. Andrews. Co-starring in the same episode as Neil Patrick Harris, Elizabeth Taylor played Todd Andrews' mother, Mrs. Andrews. An angry mob destroys her vegetable stand. Phil Hartman as Dimitri. Now, Phil Hartman, of course, did some other voice work, knowing, of course, he did quite a bit of work on The Simpsons. Everyone knows Neil Patrick Harris as Barney from How I Met Your Mother. Well, I've never watched How I Met Your Mother, so, but Doogie Howser, I think, is one a lot of people, and I think he did some other. But anyways, in the episode Mind Virus, quote unquote, Phil Hartman plays Linka's uncle Dimitri. His son Boris becomes addicted to drug bliss, which has been created by eco-villain Verminous Scum. And speaking of Verminous Scum, Jeff Goldblum, as you mentioned earlier, Fitzjozo, Jeff Goldblum appears in 5 episodes as eco-villain Verminous Scum, a rat human mutant who wants to take over the Earth by using fear and hatred. Martin Sheen as Sly Sludge. Martin Sheen guest starred in 12 episodes as Sly Sludge, an eco-villain whose waste management, quote-unquote, solutions usually cause more pollution. He eventually reforms his ways and becomes an avid recycler. Tim Curry as Mal. Tim Curry, known, he's had a few other voices, including Captain Hook and the Peter Pan cartoon, as Mal. Tim Curry played Mal, a type of artificial intelligence who assists Dr. Blight in her crimes. The role was originally played by David Rappaport, who passed away after recording the first 4 episodes. After Tim Curry took over, he voiced Mal for 27 episodes. Meg Ryan as Dr. Blight. Oh, yes. And the thing is, Dr. Blight was the evil scientist who covered half her face with her hair because covered a scar on her face. Rom-com queen Meg Ryan played Dr. Blight, an evil scientist and one of the worst eco-villains. Meg Ryan voiced Dr. Blight in season 1, and then the role was given to voice acting legend Mary Kay Bergman. Watch Captain Planet and the Planeteers on MeTV Tunes weekdays at 6 a.m. Eastern, 5 a.m. 5 a.m. Central, 3 a.m. Pacific, and Saturdays at 8 a.m. Eastern, 7 Central, 5 a.m. Pacific. Anyway, so with that, now, let's see. Verminous Scum isn't really an eco-villain, just a mass murderer who comes up with various schemes to kill. Well, I think based on what we do know about Verminous Scum and all that, he might be more of the social justice aspect of he might be kind of the social justice aspect of the of the show. Basically the idea of decrying prejudice and hate and all that. So anyways, now with all that being done and said, now we're gonna of course move on to wrestling wrap up. First go back to last night's NXT. As quite a bit happened on last night's NXT. As of course there were 2 title matches. So the show opened up with the NXT North American title on the line. Ricky Saints defended against Ethan Page, who of course defeated Ricky Saints, only for a match to be set up later for the upcoming AAA pay-per-view When Worlds Collide, in which he'll be involved in a fatal four-way title defense against Javon Evans, AAA's World Cruiserweight Champion, Laredo Kid, and Ray Phoenix. And then Mike Santana making his NXT debut. TNA superstar Mike Santana defeated Tavion Heights for him to later confront Trick Williams when Trick Williams came out to gloat over the fact that he had beaten Joe Hendry to become the new TNA World Champion. Only for Mike Santana to challenge him, and for that match to be set up on next week's Impact. Jada Parker defeated Tatum Paxley in just under 4 minutes. Jasper Troy in his debut with NXT after winning the LFG show, defeated Dante Chen in just over 3.5 minutes. And then in the main event saw Stephanie Vaquer defend the NXT Women's title against JC Jane of Fatal Attraction or Fatal Influence. And JC Jane defeated Stephanie Vaquer. Now, what's believed is the reason why Ricky Saints and Stephanie Vaquer both lost the titles. It's believed that they're going to be getting called up to the main roster soon. Also, aside from of course those two, it's also rumored that Jordan Grace will also be getting called up to the main roster. So there's a number of call-ups that are happening right now, and that's why the title changes were happening here. So now to look ahead to tonight's to look ahead to tonight's Dynamite. On tonight's Dynamite, coming from the El Paso County Coliseum in El Paso, Texas, with, of course, Excalibur, Ian Riccaboni, and Taz on commentary. In a mixed six-person tag match, you have Mike Bailey, Mark Briscoe, and Willow Nightingale taking on the Death Riders of Jon Moxley, Marina Shafir, and Gabe Kidd. Gabe Kidd, who is more of an associate, anything else. And a no DQ match for a no DQ tag team title match. In a rematch from this past Sunday, Megan Bayne and Penelope Ford take on Harley Cameron and Anna Jay. Of course, Bayne and Ford are looking to basically even the score with Cameron and Jay, who defeated them on Sunday. In a match for the AEW TNT title, Adam Cole defends the TNT title against Kyle Fletcher of the Don Callis family, and Don Callis family will be in action more so, as well as Josh Alexander will be taking on the Hounds of Hell's Brody King in a international title qualifier match. So that's all that's going down on, and that's all we have for the wrestling wrap up. So with that being said, now of course, with today being Wednesday, May 28th, 2025, let's take a look back at this day in each history. So 2005. All right. So first off, I'm going to head back 40 years ago. As on this date, 40 years ago today, the 30th issue of Conan the King, which of course started out as King Conan, from Marvel, went on sale on its date back in 1985. It sold for $1.25 and had 48 pages. The story was Revenge on the Black River, written by Don Carr, penciled by Mike Dougherty. Gail Isherwood did the inking. The lettering was done by Janice Chung. And Michael William Kakuta did the coloring. So on this date back in 1985, 40 years ago today, the 30th issue of Conan the King went on sale on this date back in 1985. And 1985 is just so nice that we're going to hit it twice. As also on this date in 1985, up in Montreal, Canada, wrestling for Lutte Internationale, translated international wrestling in French there. Dino Bravo regains the vacant Canadian International title by defeating King Tonga in Montreal. It was during this reign that he is recognized by the WWF as the Canadian Heavyweight Champion during the WWF's brief partnership with Lutte Internationale from August 1985 to January 1986. So on this date in Montreal, back in 1985, Dino Bravo regained the Canadian International title from King Tonga. King Tonga, who most people would remember as Haku or Ming years later. So now, of course, we're going to move ahead. We're going to move ahead to the year 2005. On this date in the year 2005, 20 years ago today. Mobile Suit Sunrise's Mobile Suit Zeta Gundam, a new translation, Heir to the Stars, premiered. I believe it was just a movie, or no? Yeah, it was a movie. Premiered on this date back in 2005. So 20 years ago today, Sunrise's Mobile Suit Zeta Gundam, a new translation, Heir to the Stars, premiered in Japanese theaters on this date back in 2005, 20 years ago. Of course, that was 20 years after Mobile Suit Zeta Gundam itself premiered as well. I'm going to go off camera here for another quick moment here. I'll be right back. All right, sorry about that. Anyways, I'm back now. So, all right, so we have one more piece of niche history to go over. We move ahead to the year 2010, 15 years ago today. As on this date in 2010, Warner Brothers' Godkiller, Walk Among Us, and 20th Century Fox's Space Chimps 2, Zartog Strikes Back, both premiered in movie theaters on this date back in 2010. So 15 years ago today, Godkiller Walk Among Us distributed by Warner Brothers, and Space Chimps 2 Zartog Strikes Back, distributed by 20th Century Fox, both premiered on this date back in 2010. So with that being said, I thank everybody for being here tonight. Hope everybody enjoyed the show. We'll be back here with more niche news tomorrow. Also, we will. Also, of course, this Sunday we'll have Rick Piper joining us. We take another look down Comics History Lane, looking back to May of 1940. We'll be looking at Prize Comics this week. Looking at Prize Comics number 5, in fact, with, of course, Power Nelson, our favorite future man hero, among others. So with that, I thank everybody for being here, and I hope to see everybody back here tomorrow. Bye.